ladies and gentlemen, this is Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. For those of you who don't already know, this show is broadcast every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on ucy.tv. You can catch us here Monday night, ucy.tv. You can also check out the show's page at ucy.tv/TT for Truth on the Tracks. We also rebroadcast the show on Friday nights at 9 p.m. on ucy.tv as well. Again, my name is Brandon Turbeville. I'm a staff writer for Activist Post as well. You can keep track of my articles as they come out there on activistpost.com. I'm also an author. You can check my books out at thebookpatch.com by searching my name and the titles of the books, or you can go to falseflagpublications.blogspot.com to check out those books. And if you also want to keep track of my work specifically, you can go to brandonturbeville.blogspot.com. On that website, I repost all of my articles, all of my interviews, and all of the archived broadcasts of this show. So again, that's brandonturbeville.blogspot.com. I update that site regularly if you want to keep track of my work specifically. On this show, I try to go through some of the interesting current events that are coming out that are of particular interest to me, generally of things that I've written about or that have just struck my interest up, and in hopes that they will interest you and that you might be able to take this information and move forward with it in a way that has an impact on the issue. And one of the issues that there appears to be some impact being made is on Agenda 21. Now, we've gone through Agenda 21 many times here on this show. And for those of you who don't know, Agenda 21 is a plan that was initiated by the United Nations. It's called UN Agenda 21, short for Agenda for the 21st Century. And what Agenda 21 really is a plan to take a vastly reduced human population and herd them off of the countryside and into major super cities with stack 'em and pack 'em dwelling structures and situations in which these humans will never actually see nature. These super cities will be called human habitat areas, and nature and all other forms of life, of course, will be saved for the benefit of the very rich, the very wealthy, the elite controllers. While you are born in this skyscraper, you go to school in the skyscraper. Not too much schooling, of course. You can only learn just enough to do the job, but not enough to question it. Then you go to work in the building, you grow old in the building, and you die in the building, probably by euthanasia, never seeing the outside of these buildings. It is a nightmare vision for the future of humanity, to say the least. Agenda 21, of course, although it has its roots in the United Nations and international organizations, does not stop with the United Nations. It's another typical program, international elite-based program, that does not come openly screaming of the horrors that it's going to implement. The U.S. federal government is not the main source of implementation. Well, I should take that back. It is part of the main source of implementation, but a lot of these implementation strategies center around the local governments, the city governments, the county governments, and the local councils of governments, to go even deeper into this web that's weaved by the Agenda 21 strategy. Of course, the states are involved as well. Every aspect of your government in some way has connections to this Agenda 21 and the implementation of it. Again, as we've gone over on this show, and I'll probably touch on again as we move forward. Your local governments, your local politicians, your local bureaucrats, many of them don't know. They're simply too stupid and too selfish in their own right to know what's going on. That's not to say if they did know what was going on that they would really care. I would assume that they would not, because they don't tend to care about anything. But of course, the agenda is known the further up to the toward the top that you go. But smart cities, smart meters, smart grids, all of these things are all part of the Agenda 21 plan. Of course, again, some more explanation. The smart grid, the smart city, the smart meters, particularly the smart meters, the devices that they attach to your electric meter that monitors what each and every appliance intakes of or uses up of energy. Now, this is a type of technology that might benefit you, you would believe, in one way, so you'd know how much energy you were using, you could adjust it accordingly. But of course, assisting you in lowering your energy bill is not the goal of the smart meter. It should be pretty clear that this is a method of surveillance, a method of control, because eventually the smart meters will not be meters, but they'll be smart control grids themselves, which will cut off your power when they think you're using too much. And you certainly don't get a lavish amount of energy allocated to you under this Agenda 21 system. Of course, these smart meters themselves have always been linked to a variety of health effects, very nasty things that you can get when these smart meters are in your near vicinity. So this is definitely something to take a look at, this Agenda 21 plan. Of course, Agenda 21, as I stated earlier, is in virtually every city, every county, every state in the country. And it's an area where you, at your local position, can actually come out and to launch a real attack on this New World Order system right in your own area. With that in mind, I have an article up on activistpost.com. It's entitled "Smart City Failures Dumped on Taxpayers." This article is also up on brandonturbeville.blogspot.com. And it deals with the smart city in Boulder, Colorado. So we'll jump into this here. If there was ever any doubt as to whether or not the smart grid aspect of UN Agenda 21 is marching forward, recent developments in Boulder, Colorado should dispel such skepticism. Likewise, these developments should also make clear that so-called smart technology is about much more than simply cost saving. The relevant part of this story starts as far back as 2007, when Boulder entered into an agreement with Xcel Energy to enable the city to become the world's first smart city. For those unaware of what the terms smart grid and smart city refer to, the smart grid is essentially a computerized system that allows the monitoring and control over energy use from the power plant source to every appliance in the home. Smart grid technology is a major part of UN Agenda 21, the United Nations plan to drastically reduce population into human habitat areas, meaning ultra-modern super cities with stack-em and pack-em dwelling structures and zero contact with nature and the outside world. Smart grid technology includes the infamous smart meter, which is not only a Big Brother spy device that monitors the amount of power consumed in the household, even down to the specific devices using that power, but is also linked to a variety of adverse health effects as a result of the frequencies they emit. Regardless of these issues, however, Boulder is expected to become the model city for the rest of the world within the coming years. Yet, if the Agenda 21 connections and the adverse health effects were not enough to draw serious concern from the average taxpayer, the sheer cost of the project should at least be cause for opposition. Indeed, the recent report released by the Denver Post is only one more example of how the average person who is to live as a prisoner under the coming system is eagerly paying for and building his own bars. It is also a textbook example of the privatization of services that should be provided by governments, and that the price tag for this venture as tabulated by Xcel Energy, the private company controlling Boulder's power supply, has increased from $0 to $44.5 million, with $27.9 million already being hoisted on the backs of the Colorado residents. This is something I've mentioned over and over on this show, and I've certainly mentioned it over and over in my articles, which is the privatization of essential services in cities and counties and states. The privatization of water, which we did here, and in a lot of small towns here in South Carolina, of course, the water bill goes up immediately. The quality of the water goes way down. This happens every single time. We've privatized trash pickup. We've privatized power. And it's all a disaster. It's always been a disaster. However, around May of 2008, I'll go back. Initially, of course, the cost of the entire project was supposed to be much less than the current projections because Xcel was joining with several different firms and corporations who were supposed to share the burden, which was to cost a total of $100 million. The cost to Xcel was to be only $15.3 million, as their consortium partners were expected to pick up the rest. However, around May of 2008, a discussion was held during Xcel's internal corporate finance meeting where it appeared that the cost of the project to the company had doubled to about $31 million, from 15.3 to 31. Yet, when Xcel presented their way forward for the Smart Grid City program in Boulder to the Public Utilities Committee, the company failed to mention that its cost had risen. Now, the Public Utilities Committee is this sort of farce of public officials or appointed public officials that approve or disapprove of the policies of the private companies. So it's just part of the public-private partnership. Now, obviously, don't get your hopes up because these people are entirely corrupt and generally have close ties to the power company because you have to have experts in the field, right? So these committees generally just literally work with the power companies to raise your rates and reduce the amount of services, the quality of the service that's actually provided. This is most likely because Xcel knew in advance that it had the most effective means of debt leverage known to man, the American taxpayer, to make up for any losses in the program. The smart grid, after all, must go forward at any cost. And that's exactly right. You see, they're pushing an agenda. The agenda is going to move forward whether you like it or not, whether you can afford it or not. And so what if they overspend? You're going to pay for it anyway. If they overspend, then they'll just raise the rates, they'll raise the taxes, and they'll put the burden on the back of the taxpayer. And everything will be fine. I'm going to mention more about this raising the taxes business related to to Marion County, South Carolina, a very small county, but I'll get to that in a second. During the summer of 2008, after a great deal of rushed work, crews completed installation of much of the system so that they were able to unveil the first Smart Grid City home in time for the second day of the Democratic National Convention. The home included quote, integrated software, solar panels, and an electric car charger, end quote, and gave tours to media organizations like ABC's Good Morning America. As 2009 approached, some of Xcel's partners began to back away from the project, shifting more and more of the cost onto Xcel itself. No need to worry, though, because Xcel had the captive customer base of Boulder to fall back on, which is exactly what they did. As Scott Walensky, an Xcel senior vice president, stated in PUC testimony, that's the Public Utilities Committee, quote, management concluded the cost of continuing forward with the project completion under the initial scope were less than the potential benefits that could be determined if there were a broader pilot. End quote. Thus, Xcel decided not to stop the project or even modify its goals, but to move ahead with the original plan. Now, for those of you who didn't understand what Mr. Walensky said, management concluded the cost of continuing forward with the project completion under the initial scope were less than the potential benefits that could be determined if there were a broader pilot. I'll translate. We realized that it was not a good cost-benefit analysis. We were going to lose money on the project. So instead of stopping, what we did was we made it bigger. That's the statement that was made by Walensky, translated for humans. In April of 2008, the board of Xcel set the budget of the project at $27.3 million. Note that the budget was still lower than the projected cost, which were known to be $31 million at the time. No need to tell the people, because they might get pissed off if they realize they have to pay for it. Shortly thereafter, the two executives in charge of the Smart Grid City program left Excel with Ray Gogol, the lead executive for the project, becoming CEO at Current Group, and Mike Carlson taking a position with GridPoint Incorporated. In other words, Ray Gogol left Excel, became CEO at Current Group. Mike Carlson also left Excel and took a position with GridPoint Incorporated. Both Current Group and GridPoint are consortium partners of Excel. So there you have your revolving door. Finally, it was time for Excel to cash in on its unfortunate customer base. In May 2009, Excel filed for a $132.5 million tax rate increase for Colorado that included $27 million allocated for Smart Grid City. In yet another interesting development, shortly after the filing was made to increase energy rates, Excel made the decision to shift $17 million in Smart Grid City-related software costs from Minneapolis, the other major city where Excel operates, to the Colorado budget. The Minneapolis costs, however, were actually part of Excel's normal IT budget, so there was no justifiable reason for the Colorado customer to be expected to pay for it. So in other words, Excel Energy decides to undertake this smart grid project, and very quickly they realize it's going to cost way more than they projected, so they don't tell anyone. And then the numbers come out that it's going to cost double, it's going to cost 3 times, it's going to cost 4 times as much, so they don't tell anyone. In fact, they make the program bigger. And then when they finally decide to shift the burden over to the taxpayers of Colorado, they also decide to make that bigger, because they take the IT budget from Minneapolis and they shift that onto the Colorado taxpayer as well. Boy, if you're going to engage in crime, okay, who says it doesn't pay? But if you're going to engage in crime, just do it big. Don't mess around with the petty crimes, because you might get caught. You might have to pay. No, go ahead and make sure you take advantage of the taxpayers, and you'll be fine. You make a lot of money doing it. The revised numbers submitted by Excel, now totaling $45.8 million, were subsequently challenged by the Consumer Counsel's Office, the organization which represents small businesses and residential customers, as well as industrial consumers such as Climax Molybdenum and Rocky Mountain Steel. Now you can also bet that it was the industrial consumers that really prodded the Consumer Counsel's Office to get involved here, because they're the only ones with enough money to count. As Mark Jaffe of the Denver Post writes, quote, Harry DiDomenico, a PUC analyst, testified that the project was conducted outside of normal budgeting processes and was therefore never subjected to normal budget reviews, policies, and internal audit procedures. The Consumer Counsel's Office said that once the project hit $27 million, Excel should have stopped. Any costs beyond that were imprudent. They should have stopped when it went over the 15. Climax Molybdenum and Rocky Mountain Steel in filings argued that the Smart Grid City was a research project, that it had not achieved its goals, and that shareholders, not ratepayers, should pick up the bill. End quote. Obviously, it is true that ratepayers should not foot the bill for this disastrous experiment and an even more disastrous overarching agenda. However, the collusion between global schemes and local corruption knows no bounds. After reviewing the request, the PUC actually granted Excel $27.9 million in rate hikes for Smart Grid City in January 2011. Yeah, the Public Utilities Commission. When it was clear that Excel continued on with the project, making it bigger in the face of the loss of money that they were going to take, that they were going to have to shift onto the back of the taxpayers, the Public Utilities Committee says, okay, yeah, we'll give you the 15 and we'll give you up to the 27.9. It even went so far as to state that Excel could receive the rest of the money once it demonstrated, quote, value to customers, and that it had a strategic plan for the project, end quote. There's no value to the customers, and there was never a strategic plan. That's just hilarious. Frustrated with being raped for increasingly large amounts of money while still not receiving the product they paid for, the Boulder voters agreed to allow the city council to explore whether or not they might be better served by replacing Xcel with a municipal utility. Ironically, in order to direct the city council to take these steps, the voters had to approve yet another tax. This is a great system, isn't it? It's a great scam. When you finally get sick of getting raped by the private corporation that's raising your rates and destroying the quality of the product that you get and implementing the stupid smart meters, and you finally get it through your head that maybe it's a good idea to have a public utility take charge of the energy output, you have to direct the city council to do it. But in order to direct the city council to do it, you have to raise your taxes. You pay them going in, you pay them going out, and they don't, well. In terms of the privatization of services, whether it is trash pickup, water, energy, or other necessary procurements for city life, this is the typical procedure for hoisting virtually all of the costs on the taxpayer, while private companies owned by major banks, etc., reap the profits. For instance, the taxpayers are taxed to develop and maintain a power system which is subsequently privatized. Then, when the major update to that system is due, and after fleecing the taxpayer for millions of dollars, there now lies the opportunity to revert back to city provision. Thus, when even more vast amounts of money are expended to install a totalitarian smart grid, it is likely that yet another private company will slip in to reap the benefits shortly thereafter. Nevertheless, the true issue is not necessarily the cost of the program. As I stated earlier, the entire concept of the smart grid represents a massive step toward the implementation of UN Agenda 21. But back to the municipal utility issue, as I said before, generally they take the taxpayers' money and they build up a system, whatever it is, water, energy, rail, whatever. They build up the system with the taxpayer money, they get it working fine, they get it developed, well-oiled machine, and then they privatize it after propaganda about how inefficient government is, and they privatize it, and then you end up paying more, you get less, because private companies' only reason for existing is profit. But you want somebody to run your government like a corporation, like a business, right? You want a skilled businessman to run your government. So you privatize it, you pay more, you get less, and they run it into the ground. They destroy the infrastructure, they destroy what you actually have, they asset strip it, if you will. And when it finally breaks down, when it finally goes bankrupt, then the solution is to hoist it all onto the back of the taxpayer, who then has to pay to build it back up, to make the repairs, to make the improvements, to develop it some more, to streamline it again. And when that happens, then the propaganda starts all over again and they privatize it all over again. This is how it happens every time. Indeed, smart grid technology raises a myriad of concerns in its own right. As Paul Joseph Watson writes, quote, "Indeed, privacy experts have warned that smart meters could be used to spy on consumers in a myriad of different ways, including what appliances are being used in individual homes, and even what programs are being watched on TV. The European Data Protection Supervisor, the EDPS, warns that the rollout of smart meters will allow massive collection of personal data by utility companies and governments, tracking what households do within the privacy of their own homes, whether they are away on holiday or at work, if someone uses a specific medical device or a baby monitor, or how they spend their free time. The American Academy of Environmental Medicine and other health bodies have voiced concern about the potential damaging effects of radio waves emitted by the smart meters and have urged a moratorium on installing the devices. The group recently warned that people suffering from neurological, neurodegenerative diseases, genetic defects, cancer, and other conditions should avoid smart meters because they could be adversely impacted by electromagnetic frequency and radio frequency fields emitted by the devices." End quote. Instead of demanding that the smart grid technology be delivered in a cheaper manner, it is imperative that the Boulder voters demand that the technology is removed altogether. While demanding renewable sources of energy is important, it is also important that this real demand for greener power not be corralled and co-opted into a demand for increased surveillance, control, and ultimate dehumanization. So we'll put that article up after the video here, after the archive is finished, and we'll try to throw it up on the site as well, ucy.tv/tt. But as I mentioned earlier about the sales tax issue, I mentioned of how this moves into the area and how people are so easily brainwashed in supporting these foolish things, like the capital sales tax, which is happening here in Marion County. Now, I've bitched about this on the radio for some time. I would be surprised if I haven't mentioned it in some capacity on every show that I've done since this issue came up. One of my earlier shows, I remember talking at length about the Council of Governments situation, along with the Council of State Governments, which are essentially fronts for groups like ICLEI, the local governments for sustainability, who are themselves fronts for the Agenda 21 strategy. Now, the 1% sales tax that I mentioned, and perhaps I'll go into this, is an increase 1% countywide, which the money is supposed to go to fund various projects. Now, Marion County is one of the highest counties for unemployment in the state of South Carolina, and South Carolina itself often reaches one of the top slots in the top for highest unemployment in the country. So, very economically depressed county. This is a world economic depression, after all, and this is a county that's extremely hard hit in that regard. Still, we have a bunch of some elected but mostly unelected parasites who believe that it's a good idea to raise taxes in the middle of this depression on one of the counties that's the highest in unemployment. This 1% sales tax that they are proposing is supposed to raise an estimated $9.375 million. They want to bleed the people of Marion County for $9 million in an already depressed situation. Now, I've done what I can do on this. Now, it turns out that this stupid tax, this capital sales tax, or the penny sales tax is more accurate. It turns out that it has made it onto the ballot. And like the meetings and the forums that they have to discuss the capital sales tax, or the penny sales tax, I should stop using their terms. The forums that they have for the penny sales tax, you hear about them a week after they've taken place. You hear about them in the local rag, the Marion Star and Enterprise, the paper that has openly refused to publish my short letters before, even though they met all of the requirements. They particularly would not publish my short article, basically letter to the editor, stating my opposition to the Marion County penny sales tax increase. However, since the penny sales tax increase has made it to the ballot in Marion County for November the 6th, the Marion Star and Enterprise has apparently changed its name to We Want the Tax Star and Enterprise, because there are at least 3 articles in the paper dedicated to the penny sales tax, and they are not in opposition to the tax by any means. We're going to pause here for station identification. We'll be right back after this.
I'm Madison Rupert, host of End the Lie Radio here on UCY.tv every Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific and 10 p.m. Eastern. Tune in and listen to some wonderful programming.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. We were talking a little bit about the 1% sales tax, the penny sales tax coming to Marion County. Now, if anybody is kind of tuning out right now when I'm talking about this and wondering about what a small, economically depressed county in South Carolina, why a 1% sales tax increase in the county would be a big deal to them, well, it probably, I'm sure it won't affect you when the 1% sales tax goes into effect. But the fact is, it will affect you in the sense that the penny sales tax is an issue that's happening all across the state of South Carolina and all across the country. So you can view this as a microcosm to see what's happening in your state, because it is the implementation of Agenda 21, whether you know it or not. It is coming from the Council of Government, whether you know it or not. And the Council of Government gets its marching orders from the regional COG and from the National Council of State Governments, which itself is tied in with Agenda 21 friendly organizations and Agenda 21 itself. Now, I keep complaining about the penny sales tax. I'm not sure how many listeners I have that are in Marion County. Obviously, I would encourage you to vote against this because it's made it to the ballot for November the 6th. And like all corrupt small counties, people have been propagandized. Most people won't vote on the initiative anyway. They're too worried about whether their precious puppets, Obama or Romney, are elected, that they generally don't look at any of the other positions that are up for election. Things like ballot initiatives usually get very low turnout, especially in a county like this, who unfortunately is willing to go along with the corrupt parasites that are involved in the local government and the county sales tax commission. And that's one of the individuals wrote an article for the Marion Star, Vote Yes on Marion Capital Sales Tax, by Dr. Paul DeMarco, who was a chair of the Marion County Capital Sales Tax Commission. In other words, chair of the committee to raise your sales tax commission. And there was another article in the paper by Andrew Golden, Marion County voters to decide fate of penny sales tax. And then they have a section in the article that says local officials chime in on penny tax. Of course, all of the local officials, not public servants, of course, but local officials, local authorities, are very happy about the idea of a penny sales tax increase. One even goes to say so far as to say we should have it here so we can have nice things too, like the other counties around us. You got to love it how they talk to you like children, but that's what their religion tells them to talk to you like, because you are the profane, remember. But I won't go into that necessarily. The 1% sales tax here is being justified for various renovations, some of them necessary, some of them completely frivolous at this point in time. But again, $9 million is expected to be pulled off of the poor people here in Marion County. So nevertheless, if you're in Marion County, South Carolina, if you know somebody in Marion County, South Carolina, I feel it is my obligations to encourage you to vote no against this ballot initiative, to encourage your friends, family, to vote no against the ballot initiative. If you're in Marion County, South Carolina, if you're not, this is not your issue. But I will give you an opportunity to contact certain individuals. Really, the only individual that you can contact at this point, since it's made it onto the ballot, is the newspaper. Because I have sent numerous articles to the newspaper, sent them various letters to the editor that met all their requirements, all their stringent, ridiculous requirements, that basically maintain the letter to the editor as 3 barely intelligible sentences, as a third grader could write it, with no content. Nevertheless, I met their obligations and still did not get my article published. This has happened on several occasions. Because the letters that I've submitted have been challenging the local power structure or the prevailing myths that these editors tend to believe. So if you've got time and you've got nothing to do, then you can always contact the Marion Star and Enterprise, the newspaper that only sees fit to promote one side of the story and give virtually no attention to opposition. Again, that's the Marion Star and Mullins Enterprise. You can write to them at P.O. Box 880, Marion, South Carolina 29571. Again, that's P.O. Box 880, Marion, South Carolina 29571. You can also look them up on a search engine. Again, there's a Marion, South Carolina and a Marion, Ohio that have newspapers the same names. But you can Google the Marion County, South Carolina, Marion Star and Enterprise, and you can also get their email through that. You can get their phone number as well, and you can contact them using that information. Again, if you've got nothing to do, should provide some entertainment to vent at local censorship. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this penny sales tax applies to the listener in the sense that it's coming from the Council of Government, which, without a doubt, if you are in the United States, you have a Council of Government. And that Council of Government is working at the county, the city, and the unincorporated community level. And it's working at the regional level. Here in South Carolina, again, we have several counties that are already either passing have passed the referendum, or that they're going through the referendum now. Horry County, York County, Charleston, Sumter, Richland, Dorchester, Greenwood, Aiken, Chester, Florence, Georgetown, and Kershaw. These counties all have had the penny sales tax referendum introduced. Why this is important is that it's coming from the Council of Government, the South Carolina Council of Government. And that's not mentioned when it's brought to the people in the haphazard, the disgusting, shameful way that it is brought to the people of the counties. Certain people get the information. Some people are more free than others. Some people are more important and worthy of the attention than others. But again, the center of the penny sales tax, like many other issues, because the penny sales tax here are these renovation projects, but it could also be for education, and I put that in scare quotes. It could be for a variety of different things. It's only a cover. Now, I draw your attention to the article that I've talked about several times here on this show. As above, so below, the globalist agenda has reflected in local politics through Council of Governments. You can Google that, and that'll come up at Activist Post, and you can read what I'm talking about with the penny sales tax used as an example. Now, I'm going to quit bitching about that, and I'm going to go into the Council of Governments if my listeners haven't heard about it, and I'm going to try to shed some light on it, but bear in mind that the penny sales tax will be used as an example. It says, apparently the impetus of this penny sales taxes being stealthily introduced in counties all across South Carolina has its origins in the South Carolina Council of Governments, a statewide body of unelected members holding unelected and unaccountable positions, which essentially acts as the conduit of agenda between the federal, hence international, level of bureaucrats and those of the local level. Council of Governments, while international in scope, exist at the national, state, and local levels, with the exception of some county-wide and statewide councils of governments, aka COGs. That's the acronym, COG. The COGs are divided up by region, not by traditional borders. This is the case at both the national and state levels. As mentioned above regarding the county-wide and statewide COGs, some COGs are formed at the county level specifically. This means that a county-wide COG would be made up of individuals, this is elected officials, businessmen, community leaders, appointees, and other more questionable members from each city, town, community, village, or neighborhood in the county. One can take a look at the Mendocino County, Texas COG, known as the Mendocino Council of Governments, to see an example of the county-wide COG. It appears that county-wide COGs exist in counties of specific interest to the globalist decision-makers, while most other COGs are region-based. Virtually every state in the country, however, has a statewide COG. The statewide COG is the main board of oversight of the statewide regional COGs. Thus, underneath the South Carolina cog, there are 10 state-based regions. These regions are not defined by traditional county borders as much as they are defined by, as their name suggests, regional interests. For instance, the South Carolina cog contains the SC Appalachian cog, the Upper Savannah cog, Catawba Regional cog, Central Midlands Regional cog, Lower Savannah cog, Santee Lynch's cog, PD Regional cog, Berkeley Charleston Dorchester cog, Low Country cog, and Waccamaw Regional cog. The statewide regional cogs answer to the state cog, in this case the South Carolina cog, as a directing board and oversight committee. I hope you got that. I apologize, it does sound confusing. Go read the article. It hopefully brings it out more clearly. But the idea here, of course, is that you have these council of governments. They are regional based. You have a statewide cog, and then you have the state broken up into regions where each region has their own council of government. However, the state cogs are themselves subordinate to a regional cog that is established at the national level. The official name for this organization is the Council of State Governments. Nevertheless, it is only a cog at the next highest level. The CSG, the Council of State Governments, another acronym, is itself broken up into regions, not bound by state or even national borders. So as above, so below, right? The statewide and the national cogs are developed and set up the same way. You have the national cog and then the rest of the country underneath it, which is broken up into regions. The National Level Council of State Governments, the CSG/COG, is divided up into 5 regions or spheres of operation that bear an alarming similarity to the 10 FEMA regions established in recent years, which is headed by a Council of Governors to put into place by Executive Order 13528 in January 2010 as required by the fiscal year 2008 National Defense Authorization Act. The 5 CSG regions are Washington, D.C., this is the Council of State Government regions, countrywide. They're Washington, D.C., Eastern Regional, Midwest, Southern Legislative, and West. Like the statewide regional cogs, the nationwide regional cogs are subordinated to the national board of the CSG. Thus, it is a very tangled web that has been woven for one who wishes to discover the origin of a small county's penny sales tax initiative. No kidding. When I first got into the penny sales tax initiative, I thought it was just more corrupt bureaucrats getting involved and trying to screw the taxpayer out of some more money for their own benefit. Then I heard that it was happening all over the state, and then my feelers perked up a little bit, and I started investigating, and this is what I found: the Council of Governments. This is something that needs to be exposed all across the country because it's affecting every one of you all across the country. Agenda 21 is being implemented not by the federal government signing legislation, although that is an issue, not by the state government, again, although it is possible and it does happen. But that's not where the real danger is. The real danger is not even ICLEI, because these issues, these organizations are more open. It's the Council of Governments that are redistricting, rezoning, and reshaping a community, raising taxes on communities, determining development plans on communities. These people are unelectable. These are the people who are implementing Agenda 21. And you think it's a completely local decision because that's the way it appears. Because they know if the United Nations came in with Agenda 21 and said, we're going to implement a 1% sales tax, or they look at you and they say that we're going to rezone your county and we're going to reduce the amount of rural homes, rural industry, farms, and so forth, and we're going to try to push more people into the city. They realize that you wouldn't like that very much and that you might resist it. Even if the federal government or the state government did it, they might resist it. But if you think that you did it, if it was a ballot initiative, if your local leaders, if your friend, the mayor or the local doctor the people who are involved in these things. If they passed it, then it couldn't be anything bad. Maybe it was the wrong decision, but that's as far as it goes. People make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, right? Well, there's much more to it than that. However, what seems to be to the average citizen to be merely another exercise in local governmental stupidity, incompetence, or corruption actually has its roots in a much more sinister agenda, namely the implementation of UN-based planning such as Agenda 21. Yet, although even at the regional COG level, initiatives like the penny sales tax introduced in Marion County and counties all across the country are largely hidden from the eyes of the public, when one understands the intricacies and technicalities involved in the interaction between the COGs and local governments, the implementation of the agenda tends to become much clearer. The way it works is that a centralized plan works its way from the nationwide CSG board and CSG regional COGs down to the statewide COG boards, and from there down to the statewide regional COGs. The statewide regional COGs, such as the South Carolina regional COGs mentioned above, the PD COG, Sandy Lynch's COG, etc., are then responsible for implementing the centralized Agenda 21 related plan at the local level via county councils, city councils, town and village administration boards, and community organizations and governing structures. You need to be very careful about your community organizations as well, your community leaders. They're often as bad, if not worse, as your open political leaders, because those are the people that do the footwork. In this sense, the county councils and other local governments act mainly as passive receivers and yes-men to the wishes of the COG. Although the stated mission of the COG is merely to provide an infrastructure for local governments to coordinate with one another for the purposes of developing mutually beneficial projects and addressing concerns that they may reach across borders at the request of the local governments, the fact is that the COG currently acts as the directing board to the councils, not as an advisory board which serves the local governments. And this is the case because many of the people who are on the COG board are also on the county council or on your capital sales tax commission or on your other boards. They could be businessmen, they could be elected officials, they could be police chiefs, they could be industrial men or women in your area, or they could just be well-respected people in the area that take part in this just for charity because they love to serve. They're there to serve. That's why you call them officials. But while this may be the case, the evidence proving that the COGs are funneling top-down decisions to local governments is not in any way openly stated on COG websites and official forums, at least those that this writer is aware of. Yeah, I actually sent a request to the Council of State Governments head office for the history of the CSG. I wanted to know from them when it started and who started it and who provided the funds for it, where it came from. They were very happy that I contacted them and expressed interest in the Council of State Governments. Then apparently they Googled my name, and suddenly I never heard back from them. So still waiting on that email to detail the list of the COG. If you're out there, Mr. PR representative from the Council of State Governments. But seriously, if you go to the county council or the city council, you should have your facts prepared to present them quickly and in order. But again, I do know individuals have gone to the COG meetings and actually expressed discontent with the COG and called for the discontinuing of the COG. There's not much they can really do. But normally they're glad to have you if they think you're just some local idiot that worships them for their so-called service. However, when one examines the policy direction taken by the individual COG, one can easily see the same agenda taking form in each one. Likewise, the implementation of the directives issued by the COG, while taking a slightly different form in each county, is largely the same as well. Take, for instance, the penny sales tax, which has either been accepted or is currently being pushed all across the state of South Carolina. Keep in mind, the penny sales tax, whether it has already been passed or whether it is being proposed, has been presented under the guise of several different justifications. Education, infrastructure, maintenance, recreation, highways, transportation, water and sewage, and developmental planning have all been used to justify raising the county sales tax by 1 cent. In Marion County, the main focus is repairs to recreational facilities, library and rural fire department expansions, and the construction of a new wellness center. I think the wellness center has been dropped. I didn't see it on the ballot. Other counties have used this same argument in their attempt to raise the tax, as well as variations on the concepts mentioned above. Nevertheless, the playbook is always the same. Yes, the playbook's always the same, but again, I stress the fact that this is not about a penny sales tax completely, because the penny sales tax is just one more goal that they're working toward. This could be zoning, this could be development, this could be roads, this could be green laws, this could be smart city, smart meters, smart grid planning, and so forth, local ordinances. These are the kind of things that could take place in your COG meeting. It doesn't have to be the penny sales tax, although they are using that as a popular method here in South Carolina. It's only 1 penny, right? First, after the directives from the top filter down to the statewide regional COG, the idea is circulated amongst the COG board. Because many of the members of the regional COG are often individuals holding elected government positions, political appointees, active businessmen, and otherwise influential people within their local area, the idea for raising a tax, creating a new road, etc., is easily suggested to the city, county council, tax commission, or other relevant agencies and individuals. In the case of a person who is already an elected public servant, the concept can be directly floated to the council or commission of which he is a part. Once the idea is floated to the city or county councils, the tax commission, or the agency who will allegedly be the recipient of the future funds, discussion immediately begins between government representatives. Yet, although in any given county there will be a sizable portion of the population that will oppose the tax increase, the discussion does not generally revolve around whether or not the tax should be raised, but upon how the money should be distributed. And that's exactly what happened in Marion, because the discussion never was really about whether or not we should have the tax. It was about what we should spend it on. It was a foregone conclusion that it would be passed. I guess some people really have a crystal ball just right there with them. They can be so sure of these things. Thus, as I mentioned earlier, the meetings and forums that deal with the topic at issue are usually reported in the local papers only after they have taken place, while those individuals who may be more inclined to support such a project are conveniently made aware of the location of the meetings ahead of time. As a result, the meetings tend to reflect overwhelming support for the program. The ignorance and apathy of the general public is also a major aid to those with an agenda, as it is in the case of most laws and policies foisted on the population. And you can tell there's an agenda here, because we even have business owners supporting the penny sales tax. Now, these people are too stupid, either they are too stupid to realize that higher taxes, sales taxes, means less business for them. Now, either they're that stupid, or they're working with other individuals, because this is an agenda. I'm not discounting either one. But again, if this is a small county here in South Carolina, and it works as most small counties and most small counties in the country do. It's not what you know, it's who you know. So if you're seeing an advantage to supporting the local penny sales tax increase, even though it's going to hurt your business, but yet you see that there might be another advantage that might offset that, then why not go to the forums and express support for the penny sales tax, because it surely makes it look more legitimate if a business owner is supporting it. After the distribution of funds has been discussed among the individuals pushing for the increase, the tax raise is usually placed on the ballot as a referendum to the general public. Keep in mind, I wrote this before the tax increase went on the ballot. Well before the tax increase went onto the ballot. I only found out, by the way, that it was on the ballot about 3 days ago, when someone I know went to vote and they saw it. Keep in mind, this only comes after months of propaganda by the local media and repetition of the inevitability of the tax increase. Thus, with low voter turnout, overwhelming apathy, and large-scale ignorance, the tax increase is very likely to pass. Again, substitute tax increase for ordinance, for zoning, for development plans, for smart meter, green technology, or whatnot, or renovation, or whatever the issue tends to be, roads. Substitute tax increase for that, because it can be different in your area. Often it is. If it does, then that aspect of the COG mission is complete. However, if the tax increase does not pass the referendum, then the COG goes back to the drawing board and suggests a tax increase on the basis of yet another justification. As an example, if the tax increase for recreational improvements and library and fire department expansions does not pass, the next suggestion would be a penny sales tax increase for road repair and maintenance. If this justification does not work, the premise of education will be used. Right. I'll read this next paragraph for a comment. Much like the EU Lisbon Treaty was repeatedly presented to the people of Ireland until it was finally accepted, the penny sales tax will not go away. Again, your zoning law, your ordinance will not go away. Neither will any other project initiated by the COG. It will be repeatedly introduced until the reasoning of the COG plan clicks with the public or until opposition begins to lose steam. Either way, the COG will succeed in implementing its plans, themselves coming from much higher up, via the councils and popular vote. Just like the Lisbon Treaty. They asked the Irish said no. They asked them again, they said no, but in smaller numbers. They asked them again, and finally they relented and said yes. Here, they just change the name, and they come back again and again. And they don't have to try too many times before it happens. And this is happening in your county as well. You just don't know it because you don't see the Council of Governments. The Council of Government doesn't walk out in front of you with a sign that says, this is you in Agenda 21. We want to raise your taxes. We want to herd you into human habitat areas. We want to make you live a nightmare. Of course, they're not going to do that. And the individuals on the council, on the city council, county council, the businessmen, the doctors, the lawyers, and the individuals on the Council of Government seem to be very respectable people, right? Because the people in your area, your town, they certainly respect them, so they have to be good people. If you don't trust them, then obviously something's wrong with you. Now again, we don't have time to go into it all the way tonight, but go check that article out if you want to get a good example of how these Council of Governments work. As above, so below. Globalist agenda reflected in local politics through Council of Governments. And there's also a part 2 that you can check that out as well up on activistpost.com. Again, you can follow my work at activistpost.com, brandonturbeville.blogspot.com. Again, this is Truth on the Tracks. You can find us here every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and rebroadcast on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on ucy.tv. You can find this show's page at ucy.tv/TT for Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. We'll see you next week.